Imagine this. It's 3 a.m. in a creaky old Victorian house on the foggy outskirts of Salem, Massachusetts. The clock strikes the witching hour, and suddenly a chilling giggle echoes through the halls. Not the innocent laugh of a child, but something twisted, mocking, like nails scraping on a chalkboard mixed with malicious joy. In the next room, a heart stops beating. Someone dies without warning, their face frozen in terror. And the source? A seemingly harmless doll, sitting innocently on a shelf, its painted smile wider than before. If that sends shivers down your spine, buckle up, because this is the true tale of the doll that laughs at 3 a.m. A story where every giggle claims a life. Stick around, because what starts as a family heirloom turns into a nightmare that could happen to anyone. Let me set the scene properly. The year is 2023, and the Thompson family has just moved into this historic home in Salem, a place steeped in whispers of witchcraft and unexplained tragedies from the infamous trials of 1692. John Thompson, a pragmatic history professor at a local college, saw the house as a bargain. "It's got character," he'd say with a grin, ignoring the locals' warnings about its cursed past. His wife, Sarah, a freelance writer with a penchant for ghost stories, was thrilled by the eerie vibe. She thought it would inspire her next novel. Their 10-year-old daughter, Emily, was the most excited. With her wild curly hair and boundless curiosity, she loved exploring every nook and cranny of the sprawling property. The house itself was a relic. Tall gables piercing the sky, warped wooden floors that creaked underfoot, and an attic filled with forgotten relics from previous owners. The previous inhabitant was an eccentric antique collector named Elias Crow, who had died mysteriously in his sleep a year earlier. Rumors swirled that he collected items with dark energies, but the Thompsons dismissed it as small-town folklore. "People here love their witch tales," Sarah laughed as they unpacked boxes in the living room, sunlight filtering through dusty stained glass windows. It was on their third day in the house that Emily discovered the doll. While playing hide-and-seek with their golden retriever, Max, she ventured into the attic, a dim, cobweb-draped space smelling of mothballs and old secrets. Amid piles of yellowed newspapers and tarnished silverware, she spotted a wooden chest tucked in the corner. Curiosity piqued. She pried it open with a rusty crowbar she'd found nearby. Inside, nestled in faded velvet, was the doll, about 2 feet tall, with porcelain skin, glassy blue eyes that seemed to follow you, and a mop of raven black hair. Its dress was Victorian lace, frayed but elegant, and its lips curved into an eternal, unnerving smile. "Oh, you're beautiful," Emily whispered, hugging it close. She named it Lila, after her favorite character from a bedtime story. That evening, over dinner, roast chicken and mashed potatoes in the cozy kitchen, Emily proudly showed off her find. "Look what I found, Mom!" "Dad, isn't she pretty?" Sarah examined it with a writer's eye. "It's antique, probably from the 1800s. Could be worth something." John, ever the skeptic, chuckled. "Just an old toy. But if it makes you happy, kiddo, keep it." Grandma Eleanor, Sarah's mother, who had come to help with the move, eyed it warily. At 72, with her silver hair and sharp intuition, she had grown up hearing tales of haunted objects in New England. Dolls like that, they hold memories. Sometimes bad ones, she muttered, but no one paid much heed. That first night, as the family settled in, strange things began subtly. Max, usually a bundle of energy, whimpered and refused to enter Emily's room, where Lila now sat on the nightstand. The air felt heavier, charged with an unspoken tension. Emily fell asleep clutching the doll, dreaming of laughter in the distance. But at exactly 3 a.m., the house stirred. John bolted awake in the master bedroom, heart pounding. "Did you hear that?" he whispered to Sarah. A faint giggle, like a child's, but laced with something sinister, drifted from upstairs. Probably Emily talking in her sleep. Sarah yawned, rolling over. The next morning, they found Max dead in the backyard. No bites, no poison, just stiff and cold, his eyes wide with what looked like pure fear. The vet shrugged over the phone. Sometimes animals just go. Heart failure from stress, maybe. John buried him under an oak tree, chalking it up to the move's upheaval. But Emily was devastated, tears streaming as she hugged Lila tighter. "Don't worry. Lila will keep me company," she said innocently. Little did they know, this was just the beginning. The giggles would return, louder each time, and with them, death would creep closer. As the days passed, Sarah started researching the house's history online, uncovering old newspaper clippings about Elias Crow. He had collected cursed artifacts, including dolls from Europe, rumored to be vessels for spirits. One article mentioned a similar doll linked to unexplained deaths in the 1920s. Coincidence? John insisted, but doubt flickered in his eyes. By the end of the week, the family noticed Lila's position changing slightly. Arms crossed one day, head tilted the next, as if it moved on its own. Emily swore she heard whispers from the doll at night, promising fun games. Grandma Eleanor, sensing the growing dread, suggested a family prayer. "Evil hides in plain sight," she warned. That night, at 3 a.m., the giggle returned, not faint, but echoing like a taunt. And in the morning, the first human tragedy struck. The morning after that haunting giggle pierced the silence, Sarah was the first to rise. She patted down the creaky stairs to the kitchen, intending to brew coffee and shake off the unease clinging to her like morning mist. But as she passed Grandma Eleanor's guest room, something felt off. The door was ajar, and an unnatural stillness hung in the air. Heart quickening, Sarah pushed it open. There lay Eleanor on the four-poster bed, her face pale and twisted in a grimace of shock, eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. No breath, no pulse. "Mom?" Mom! Exclamation mark Sarah's scream echoed through the house, rousing John and Emily from their sleep. John burst in, phone already in hand, dialing 911. Paramedics arrived within minutes, their sirens cutting through the foggy Salem dawn like a bad omen. "Looks like a massive stroke," the lead medic said, shaking his head sympathetically. "Happens sometimes with the elderly, sudden and painless." But Sarah wasn't convinced. Eleanor's health had been fine. She'd been chatting animatedly about family recipes just the night before. As the body was wheeled out on a stretcher, Emily clung to Lila, tears soaking the doll's lace dress. "Grandma wouldn't wake up," she whimpered. John hugged her tight, his professor's logic faltering. "It's just a coincidence, sweetie. Grandma was old." The funeral arrangements consumed the next few days, a whirlwind of calls to relatives and somber visits from neighbors bearing casseroles and condolences. But beneath the grief, paranoia brewed. Sarah couldn't stop thinking about the giggle, the way it had swelled that night, almost celebratory. She confided in John over a late-night glass of wine in the dimly lit study, surrounded by unpacked books on American folklore. "John, that doll. Mom mentioned it looked cursed, and the timing, right after the laugh." John rubbed his temples, his skepticism cracking. Sarah, we're in Salem. Every house here has a ghost story. But yeah, it's weird. Let's look into it. Diving deeper, Sarah spent hours on her laptop, scouring online archives and local history forums. She uncovered chilling details about Elias Crow, the previous owner. Crow wasn't just an antique collector. He was obsessed with paranormal artifacts. One forum post from a former acquaintance described how he'd acquired Lila. Wait, no. The doll was originally called Evelyn, after a Victorian-era medium who claimed it housed a spirit. According to digitized newspaper clippings from the 1890s, Evelyn the medium had used the doll in seances, but things went awry. Participants reported hearing laughter before untimely deaths. It's like a harbinger, one article quoted. Sarah's blood ran cold as she read aloud to John. The doll was said to laugh at 3 a.m., signaling the Reaper's approach. Families who owned it lost loved ones one by one. John, now intrigued despite himself, joined the research. They visited the Salem Witch Museum the next day, a touristy spot with exhibits on the 1692 trials, but also a small section on modern hauntings. A curator, an elderly woman with wire-rimmed glasses, perked up at their description. Ah, the laughing doll legend. It's tied to European folklore, porcelain vessels for trapped souls. Some say it's a dybbuk from Jewish mysticism, others a poltergeist. But in Salem, it's linked to the Crow estate. Elias believed it fed on fear. She handed them a pamphlet with grainy photos of similar dolls, their smiles eerily identical to Lila's. Back home, the atmosphere thickened. Emily, oblivious to the adults' whispers, played with Lila in the sun-dappled backyard, staging tea parties under the oak where Max was buried. But even she noticed changes. Lila whispers to me, Mommy. She says she'll protect us, but only if we keep her happy. Sarah forced a smile, but inside, dread coiled. That evening, as storm clouds gathered over Salem's jagged rooftops, the family tried to normalize pizza for dinner, a movie in the living room. Yet, John kept glancing at the attic stairs, where they'd temporarily stashed Lila to give Emily space. As midnight approached, sleep eluded them. Sarah tossed in bed, replaying Eleanor's frozen expression. John patrolled the house, checking locks like a man bracing for invasion. Emily, in her room, hummed lullabies to herself. Then at precisely 3 a.m., it happened again. The giggle started softly, bubbling up from the attic like distant thunder, then grew into a cackle that rattled the windows. It wasn't just sound, it carried weight, a malevolent glee that made the air vibrate. John grabbed a flashlight and stormed upstairs, Sarah trailing behind. The attic door creaked open on its own. There sat Lila on the chest, eyes gleaming in the beam, smile stretched impossibly wide. "Throw it out!" Sarah hissed, but John hesitated, transfixed. The laughter faded, leaving an oppressive silence. Morning brought no immediate death, but the mail held a bombshell. A letter from Eleanor's lawyer, revealing she'd updated her will days before arriving, leaving the family a cryptic note. Beware the laughter in the night. It claims what it desires. Sarah's hand shook. She knew something. Tensions rose as Emily demanded Lila back. "She's lonely up there." The girl pouted, but her eyes held a strange glaze, as if echoing the doll's influence. Over the following days, anomalies multiplied. Objects moved. Keys vanished from hooks, only to reappear in odd places. Whispers echoed in empty rooms, mimicking loved ones' voices. John, the rationalist, consulted a colleague, a parapsychologist, who suggested electromagnetic fields or infrasound causing hallucinations. But dolls as foci for entities? It's rare, but documented in cases like Annabelle, he said, referencing the famous haunted doll in Connecticut. Sarah, inspired, started journaling everything, turning her writer's instinct into a makeshift investigation log. One afternoon, while Emily napped, they confronted the doll in the attic. John poked it with a stick. Nothing. Sarah sprinkled salt around it, a folk remedy from her research. If it's supernatural, this might bind it. But as dusk fell, Emily woke screaming, "Lila's angry. She says someone has to pay." That night, the giggle returned earlier at 2:45 a.m., frantic and insistent. And by dawn, the next victim emerged. Not a death, but a harbinger. Their neighbor, old Mr. Hargrove, who had helped with the move, collapsed while walking his dog, muttering about laughter in the fog, before slipping into a coma. The family was unraveling. John proposed selling the house. Sarah wanted an exorcism. Emily, however, grew possessive, sneaking Lila back to her room. "She's my friend," she insisted, her voice eerily mature. As the giggles intensified, echoing even in daylight whispers, the Thompsons realized the doll wasn't just haunted. It was hungry, and its appetite was growing. The coma of Mr. Hargrove sent ripples through the neighborhood, turning the Thompsons' new home into a focal point of hushed gossip. Salem's streets, lined with colonial-era buildings and tourist traps peddling witch hats, buzzed with renewed tales of curses. That house has always been trouble. A barista at the local coffee shop whispered to Sarah as she grabbed her morning latte, her hands still trembling from lack of sleep. Elias Crow used to say the doll chose its victims. Sarah nodded numbly, her writer's mind racing to connect the dots, but her heart heavy with fear. Back at the Victorian manor, with its ivy-clinging walls now seeming more like prison bars, the family convened in the kitchen. John paced the tiled floor, his professorial calm shattered. We can't ignore this anymore. The giggles, the deaths, it's escalating. Emily sat at the table, Lila perched on her lap like a loyal pet, her small fingers stroking the doll's hair. "But Daddy, Lila didn't do anything. She's just a doll." Her voice carried an unnatural conviction, eyes darting as if listening to unspoken words. Sarah knelt beside her. "Sweetie, maybe we should put Lila away for a bit, just to be safe." Emily's face twisted in defiance. "No, she'll get mad." That afternoon, John took action. He contacted Dr. Miriam Hale, the parapsychologist colleague he'd spoken to earlier, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s with a PhD in anomalous psychology. She agreed to visit. Arriving in a sensible sedan, clad in a blazer and carrying a toolkit of sensors, EMF meters, thermal cameras, and audio recorders, Dr. Hale exuded scientific authority. "I've studied cases like this," she explained in the living room, where family portraits now hung crookedly as if disturbed by unseen hands. Objects can become psychically charged, especially in places like Salem, with its history of trauma. The 1,692 trials left residual energy. Add a doll with a murky past, and you've got a potential poltergeist anchor. They led her to Emily's room, where Lila now sat on the bed, its blue eyes reflecting the afternoon light like frozen pools. Dr. Hale scanned it with her devices. The EMF meter spiked erratically. High electromagnetic fluctuations could indicate spirit activity. She played back an audio clip from her recorder, faint whispers indistinguishable but insistent. This isn't normal. Dolls like this were often used in Victorian spiritualism as spirit traps. If it's linked to deaths, it might be a parasitic entity feeding on life force. John crossed his arms. So, how do we stop it? Dr. Hale's face grew grave. Ritual disposal. Burn it, bury it with salt and iron. But beware, these things resist. As evening descended, fog rolling in from the nearby harbor, the family prepared. John built a fire in the backyard pit, the flames crackling against the chill. Sarah gathered salt from the kitchen, whispering protective chants she'd found in online occult forums, real ones backed by anthropological studies on folklore remedies. Emily protested vehemently, tears streaming. Please, don't hurt her. She promises she'll be good. But John scooped up the doll, its porcelain cold and unyielding. As he carried it outside, a wind whipped up unnaturally, extinguishing streetlights and rustling leaves like mocking applause. The ritual began under a moonless sky. Dr. Hale sprinkled holy water, sourced from a local church for authenticity, while reciting a binding incantation from her notes on historical exorcisms. By the elements, we sever your hold. John tossed Lila into the flames. The doll didn't burn easily. Its dress smoldered, but the porcelain glowed, and for a moment, the smile seemed to widen in defiance. A low giggle escaped the fire, distorted by the heat, sending chills through everyone. Then silence. The doll crumbled to ash, which they buried under the oak tree with iron nails and salt. Relief washed over them initially. That night, the house felt lighter. No creaks, no whispers. Emily sulked but slept soundly. Sarah and John shared a tentative embrace in bed. Maybe it's over, he murmured. But at 3 a.m., the impossible happened. A giggle erupted, not from the attic or yard, but from everywhere, surrounding them like a chorus. It was louder, more triumphant, laced with echoes of familiar voices. Max's bark, Eleanor's sigh, even Mr. Hargrove's groan. John leapt up, flashlight in hand, racing to the backyard. The burial site was disturbed. Dirt clawed away, ashes gone. Panic set in at dawn. Emily was the first to find it. Lila, reformed and pristine, sitting on her pillow as if nothing had occurred. See, she came back, the girl said, with a smile mirroring the doll's. Sarah screamed, backing away. Dr. Hale, called back urgently, arrived pale-faced. This is unprecedented. It must have imprinted on the house, or on Emily. Entities like this can regenerate through belief or fear. She cited real cases, the Annabelle doll, documented by the Warrens, which reportedly moved and caused harm despite containment, or the Robert the Doll in Key West, inspiring apologies from visitors to avoid curses. These aren't myths. Museums have records, witness testimonies. The day blurred into frenzy. John barricaded the doll in the basement, chaining the door. Sarah scoured more evidence. Police reports from Elias Crow's death mentioned unexplained laughter in the autopsy notes, dismissed as hallucination, but now eerily relevant. Emily grew withdrawn, humming tunes that sounded like Victorian lullabies, her eyes glazing over during conversations. Whispers plagued the adults. Accusations in their minds. You failed them. Objects flew. A vase shattered against the wall. Books toppled from shelves. By nightfall, the giggles started sporadically, building like a storm. At 2:30 a.m., a crash from the basement, the chains broken. Lila was back in Emily's room. The girl clutched it, whispering, "It's okay, we'll play, forever." Sarah, hysterical, grabbed the doll and smashed it against the floor. Porcelain shards scattered, but the giggle persisted, now inside their heads. John collapsed, clutching his chest in pain. Not a heart attack, but close, the doctor later said, stress-induced arrhythmia. As the paramedics left, Dr. Hale warned, "It's bonded to Emily now. We need a specialist, an exorcist." The family huddled in the living room, the house alive with malice. The doll's pieces reassembled slowly on the floor, smile intact. Death loomed closer, its laughter the herald. With the doll's shards reassembling before their eyes like a grotesque puzzle solving itself, the Thompsons' world tilted into full-blown terror. The basement door, once chained, now hung off its hinges, splintered wood scattered like accusations. John, recovering from his arrhythmia scare, stared at the reformed Lila, its smile a slash of mockery in the dim light. "This isn't possible," he gasped, his voice hoarse from the strain. Sarah scooped up Emily, who reached longingly for the doll. "We're leaving, now." But as they rushed to pack essentials in the hallway, clothes shoved into duffels, keys jangling, the house rebelled. Doors slammed shut on their own, locks clicking with finality. Windows fogged over, etched with faint giggles in the condensation. Dr. Hale, still on site, phoned her contact. Father Michael Reyes, a Jesuit priest specializing in paranormal deliverance. "He's handled cases like the Enfield poltergeist echoes," she explained hurriedly, referencing documented hauntings in England where objects moved and voices tormented families. Father Reyes arrived by midnight, his black clerical garb stark against the foggy Salem night. A sturdy man in his 60s with a salt and pepper beard and eyes that had seen too much darkness, he carried a worn leather case containing holy relics, a crucifix from Rome, vials of blessed oil, and ancient texts on demonology. The family gathered in the living room, candles flickering as power outages plagued the house, bulbs bursting in showers of sparks. Emily sat cross-legged on the rug, Lila in her arms, humming that eerie lullaby. Father Reyes observed her keenly. The entity has latched onto the child. Innocence is a powerful conduit. He unpacked his tools on the coffee table, the wood groaning under the weight. John, skeptical but desperate, recounted everything. The giggles, the deaths, the failed burning. Science failed us. Now what? Father Reyes nodded solemnly. This isn't mere haunting. It's possession by proxy. Dolls like this trace back to old world curses. Think of the island of the dolls in Mexico, where effigies are said to house drowned spirits, or the Japanese okiku doll that grows hair. Real artifacts, verified by museums and investigators. He began with diagnostics, sprinkling holy water around the room, watching for reactions. The liquid hissed on contact with Lila, steam rising like breath. Emily winced, as if burned. "It hurts her," she cried. Father Reyes recited Latin prayers, his voice steady. "Exorcizo te, omnis spiritus immunde." The air grew thick, oppressive, shadows lengthening unnaturally on the walls. The giggle erupted then. Not a single laugh, but a cacophony, overlapping voices mocking the incantation. Furniture rattled. Books flew from shelves, pages tearing mid-air. Sarah shielded Emily, but the girl thrashed. "Stop! Lila says you're the bad ones." The exorcism intensified. Father Reyes anointed the doll with oil, the substance bubbling like acid on its porcelain. Lila's eyes rolled back, revealing blackened voids. John held the crucifix aloft, his hands shaking. Dr. Hale monitored with her thermal camera, capturing cold spots swirling around Emily. Temperature drop, entity manifesting. Suddenly, visions assaulted them. Flashes of the doll's history projected like a horror reel. They saw Evelyn the medium in sepia tones, channeling spirits in 1890s parlors, only for laughter to precede her clients' demises. Then Elias Crow, alone in this very house, pleading as the giggles claimed his family one by one, verified in old coroner's reports Sarah had unearthed, listing unexplained cardiac arrest amid auditory hallucinations. As the ritual peaked, Emily convulsed, her voice distorting into something ancient and gravelly. "You can't banish what you invited." The entity spoke through her, revealing its nature. A vengeful spirit of a witch trial victim, trapped in the doll by a curse to perpetuate suffering. Father Reyes pressed on, commanding departure in God's name. The house shook, plaster cracking from ceilings. Lila cracked too, fissures spiderwebbing its face, but it laughed louder, the sound piercing eardrums. In the chaos, tragedy struck anew. Dr. Hale, closest to the doll, clutched her throat, gasping. Her face turned blue, eyes bulging in terror. "Can't breathe." She collapsed, the entity siphoning her life force. Father Reyes diverted, performing last rites as John performed CPR. But it was too late. Hale's heart stopped. Her final whisper, "It's stronger." The giggle subsided into smug silence, the doll mending itself once more. Emily slumped, exhausted but unharmed, murmuring apologies to Lila. Dawn broke weakly through the fog, the family shell-shocked in the wreckage. Father Reyes, sweating and resolute, gathered his things. This spirit feeds on division. We must unite. Faith, science, love. But bonds were fracturing. John blamed Sarah for researching too deeply, stirring it up. Sarah accused John of denial-delaying action. Emily withdrew further, loyal to the doll. They buried Hale's involvement quietly. Official cause, anaphylactic shock, but they knew better. Local news snippets later reported mysterious death in haunted Salem home, echoing real unsolved cases like the Bell Witch hauntings in Tennessee, where laughter preceded fatalities. Desperation mounted. Father Reyes suggested relocating Emily to a convent for protection, but Sarah refused. We fight together. As days blurred, the giggles became constant undertones, in the walls, the pipes, even their dreams. John suffered nightmares of losing everyone, waking in cold sweats. Sarah documented obsessively, her journal a testament to resilience amid horror. Emily drew pictures, smiling dolls surrounded by graves. One evening, as thunder rumbled over the harbor, the entity escalated. Lights flickered, temperatures plummeted. The giggle swelled into a roar, and upstairs, a scream. Emily's. They rushed to find her levitating slightly above the bed, Lila glowing in her grasp. "It wants more," she intoned, eyes rolled white. The climax was building, the doll's hunger insatiable. The sight of Emily, hovering inches above her bed, her small frame rigid, and Lila glowing like a cursed lantern in her grasp, froze the Thompsons in their tracks. The air in the room was icy, breath visible in swirling clouds, as if the house itself exhaled malice. The giggle, now a guttural roar, pulsed through the walls, rattling picture frames until glass shattered on the hardwood floor. Father Reyes, his face etched with resolve, clutched his crucifix tighter, shouting above the din, "In nomine Patris, recede!" But the entity mocked him. Emily's voice, twisting into a snarl, "This house is mine. You are mine." Sarah lunged for her daughter, but an invisible force shoved her back, slamming her against the wardrobe with a sickening thud. John caught her, his face pale as Emily's levitation intensified, her curls floating like tendrils in water. Father Reyes pivoted, splashing blessed oil across the room, drawing from documented cases in his training where physical barriers disrupted demonic manifestations, like the 1976 Ammons case in Indiana, where children levitated amid possession. The oil hissed on contact with Lila, sending acrid smoke curling upward. Emily screamed. A child's scream this time, not the entity's, and dropped to the bed, gasping. Lila fell too, its glow fading, though its smile remained, tauntingly serene. The giggle retreated to a distant hum, but the reprieve felt like a predator toying with prey. It's weakening her, Reyes warned, checking Emily's pulse. The entity uses her energy. We need to sever their bond before it kills her. Sarah, bruised but unyielding, cradled Emily, who whimpered. Lila said if I let her go, I'll die alone. The words cut deep, echoing Sarah's fear of losing her daughter. John, grappling with his skepticism, demanded, How do we sever it? Burning failed. This, he gestured at the chaos, failed. Father Reyes knelt, voice low. The spirit thrives on fear and isolation. Emily's belief in Lila's friendship fuels it. We need a counterforce, love, unity, and faith, but it'll fight dirty. He cited historical parallels. The 1928 Romanian doll, where a family's collective prayer banished a spirit after failed exorcisms, documented in Vatican archives. We need Emily to reject it willingly. The family relocated to the living room where the candles still burned, casting long shadows on the walls now marred with scratches resembling claw marks. Emily curled up on the couch, pale and trembling, while Lila was locked in a steel box lined with iron nails, a folk remedy backed by New England lore to trap spirits like those in the Connecticut witch trials. Father Reyes stayed overnight, praying softly, while John and Sarah took turns watching Emily. Sarah, flipping through her journal, found a pattern. The entity struck hardest when the family was divided. Max's death after John's dismissal, Eleanor's after her warnings, Hale's after their argument over rituals. It pits us against each other, she whispered to John. We've been feeding it. Morning brought a plan. Father Reyes suggested a reclamation ritual, blending psychology and spirituality. Emily must confront Lila, denouncing its hold, while the adults reinforced her with affirmations of family strength. Sarah, drawing from her writing research on trauma recovery, proposed a tactic. Tell Emily stories of their happiest moments, vacations, birthdays, to rebuild her emotional resilience. John, though uneasy with the spiritual angle, agreed, citing studies on cognitive behavioral therapy countering fear-based fixation, like those used in phobia treatment. They started that afternoon in the dining room, sunlight struggling through heavy clouds. Sarah recounted a trip to Cape Cod when Emily was 6, giggling as she chased seagulls. You were so brave running into the waves, Sarah said, squeezing her hand. Emily smiled faintly, but her eyes flicked to the basement door where Lila was confined. John added a memory of building her treehouse, how she'd painted it pink. We did it together, kiddo. Father Reyes led a prayer, not Latin this time, but a simple one. Protect this family with love. Emily relaxed slightly, color returning to her cheeks, but the entity wasn't done. That night, at 2:50 a.m., the house erupted again. The giggle returned, not from the basement, but from Emily's room upstairs. They raced to find the steel box open, Lila perched on the dresser, its eyes glinting like stars in a void. Emily stood before it, trance-like, murmuring, "You're my only friend." Before anyone could react, the windows shattered inward, glass shards hovering midair like daggers. Father Reyes shouted a command, and the shards fell harmlessly, but the message was clear. The entity was enraged. Sarah snapped Emily out of it, hugging her fiercely. "You're not alone, baby. We're here." Emily sobbed, torn between fear and loyalty to Lila. Father Reyes noted the timing. "It's desperate. Our unity threatens it." He proposed escalating, contacting a Native American shaman for a cleansing ritual, citing synergies between Christian and indigenous practices, like those documented in the 1990s New Mexico hauntings, where combined rites succeeded. John, now fully on board, agreed to drive to Boston the next day to meet the contact, a Wampanoag elder named Thomas Whitefeather. As dawn broke, the family clung to fragile hope. But cracks widened. John overheard Sarah praying alone, doubting their strength. Emily hid drawings of Lila under her pillow, whispering apologies. The giggles now came in daylight, softer but constant, like a ticking clock. Sarah found a chilling clue in her research, a 1693 court record mentioning a Salem woman executed as a witch whose dying curse involved a vessel of laughter to plague the guilty. The doll's origin aligned with this timeline, suggesting a revenge-driven spirit. That evening, as John prepared for his trip, the entity struck again. The basement flooded inexplicably, black, oily water seeping through cracks, reeking of decay. Lila, untouched, floated atop it, smiling. Emily, watching from the stairs, whispered, "She's calling me." The family faced a choice: flee and risk the entity following, or fight on their cursed ground. The black, oily water pooling in the basement was no ordinary flood. It shimmered unnaturally, reflecting no light, and carried a stench like rotting flesh mixed with old roses, a smell Sarah later described in her journal as death's perfume. Lila floated atop it, pristine and smiling, as if mocking their efforts to confine her. John waded in, ankle deep, to retrieve the doll, but the water clung to his skin, cold and viscous, like it was alive. He shoved Lila back into the steel box, now dented from its mysterious escape, and hammered more iron nails into the lid. "This ends now," he growled, though his voice trembled with doubt. Emily, watching from the stairs, clutched the banister, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and longing. "She doesn't like that, Daddy," she whispered, as if relaying a message. The family was fraying. Sarah, nursing bruises from the wardrobe incident, spent hours scouring her research, uncovering a chilling detail. The 1693 Salem witch trial record mentioned a woman named Abigail Morse, executed for cursing her accusers with laughter that heralds death. Abigail's belongings, including a doll, were burned, but rumors persisted that her spirit latched onto it, seeking vengeance. Sarah cross-referenced this with Elias Crow's estate records, found in a local archive's digitized collection, confirming he'd bought a Victorian spirit vessel from a European auction in 1995. The timeline fit too perfectly. Lila, or Evelyn, was no ordinary antique. Father Reyes, exhausted but resolute, prepared for the arrival of Thomas Whitefeather, the Wampanoag shaman. As dawn broke over Salem's foggy harbor, a pickup truck rumbled up the gravel driveway. Whitefeather, a wiry man in his late 60s with braided hair and eyes sharp as flint, stepped out carrying a bundle of sage and hawk feathers. His presence commanded respect, grounded in centuries of tribal knowledge. "This land remembers pain," he said, surveying the house's gabled silhouette. "The trials poisoned it, white man's fear clashing with our spirits. Your doll is a bridge for something older, angrier. He cited oral histories, passed down among the Wampanoag, of objects imbued with grief from colonial violence, similar to haunted artifacts in native museums. Inside, Whitefeather walked the house, burning sage until thick smoke curled like spirits themselves. He paused at Emily's room, sensing the entity's focus. It's tied to the girl, he confirmed, echoing Father Reyes. She's open. Her love for the doll is its anchor. Emily, sitting on her bed, hugged her knees, refusing to meet his gaze. Lila's not bad. She's sad, she insisted, her voice small but defiant. Sarah's heart sank. Her daughter's bond with the doll was tightening like a noose. Whitefeather proposed a dual ritual. Father Reyes would continue Christian prayers while he performed a Wampanoag cleansing, smudging with cedar, and chanting to honor the land's original spirits. Two faiths, one purpose, he said, referencing successful joint rituals in 2000's New England hauntings, where native and Christian practices neutralized malevolent forces. But he warned, the spirit will resist. It'll exploit your weaknesses, doubt, anger, fear. John, still reeling from the flood, snapped. We're trying, but nothing works. Sarah shot him a look. We're not giving up on Emily. Their bickering flared, the entity's influence seeping into their words. The ritual began at dusk. The house bathed in the orange glow of a stormy sunset. Whitefeather lit a fire in the backyard, under the oak where Max was buried, while Father Reyes anointed doorways with oil. Emily sat between them, clutching a family photo instead of Lila, a compromise Sarah enforced. The air grew heavy, the giggle returning as a low hum, vibrating in their bones. Whitefeather chanted in Algonquian, his voice rising over the wind, while Reyes recited psalms. For a moment, hope flickered. Emily smiled faintly, squeezing Sarah's hand. Then chaos erupted. The fire flared unnaturally, flames licking 10 feet high. The giggle exploded into a scream, not from Lila, but from the house itself, pipes groaning, walls cracking. Emily seized, her eyes rolling back, and spoke in Abigail Morse's voice. You stole my life, now I take yours. Objects levitated, chairs, lamps, even the family photo, crashing against walls. John tackled Emily to the ground, shielding her as a mirror shattered, shards grazing his arm. Whitefeather threw sage into the fire, shouting, Ancestors, guide this spirit away. The giggle faltered, but Lila, still locked in the basement, glowed through the box's seams, its laughter piercing the night. The ritual collapsed. Emily, now limp, sobbed, I'm sorry, Lila. Father Reyes, bleeding from a cut on his forehead, gasped. It's using her guilt. Whitefeather, undeterred, noticed something. The oak tree's roots, exposed from the flood, pulsed faintly, as if alive. The curse is tied to this land, he said, citing native beliefs about sacred grounds holding spirits, like those documented in Wampanoag oral traditions. He proposed digging up the roots, cleansing them with salt and fire, but it would take days to prepare. That night, the family slept in the living room, too scared to separate. The giggles came in waves, mocking their exhaustion. Sarah found Emily whispering to the basement door, promising Lila she'd be good. John, his arm bandaged, argued with Sarah over fleeing. We can't keep her safe here, he yelled. Sarah countered. Running won't stop it. It followed Crow's family across states. Her journal noted similar cases, the Perrin family haunting in Rhode Island, where a spirit pursued victims beyond the property, later inspiring. The Conjuring. By morning, a new horror emerged. Emily's drawings, now covering her walls, depicted the family dead. John with a noose, Sarah drowned, Emily smiling, beside Lila. The entity was winning, its laughter a countdown. Whitefeather prepared for the root cleansing, but time was running out. The discovery of Emily's drawings, crude sketches of the family's demise scrawled in crayon across her bedroom walls, shattered what little resolve the Thompsons had left. John stared at the image of himself with a noose, his hands trembling as he traced the jagged lines. Sarah, clutching her journal, recognized Emily's handwriting but not her intent. The girl had never shown such darkness. Emily herself sat silently in the corner, eyes distant, humming that cursed lullaby as if channeling Lila's will. The air in the house felt like a held breath, heavy with the ever-present giggle now seeping from the walls like a heartbeat. Father Reyes and Thomas Whitefeather exchanged grim looks in the living room, where the candles had burned to stubs, wax pooling like blood. Whitefeather's observation about the oak tree's pulsing roots became their new focus. "This land is a vessel," he explained, his voice steady despite the chaos. "The witch's curse, Abigail Morse's, bound her spirit to the earth here, not just the doll. The tree's roots are its veins." He cited Wampanoag teachings, documented in anthropological studies of New England tribes, where sacred trees anchor spiritual energies, sometimes malevolent ones from colonial disruptions. Father Reyes nodded, adding, "The Bible speaks of cleansing defiled land. Leviticus 14. We must purify the roots to break the cycle." Their plan was clear but daunting. Excavate the oak's roots, burn them with sacred herbs, and seal the ground with salt and prayer. John, no longer the skeptic, grabbed a shovel from the garage, his arm still bandaged from the mirror incident. Sarah, ever the researcher, found a 2001 archaeological report online about Salem's soil holding unusual magnetic properties near trial sites, potentially amplifying paranormal activity. "It's like the land itself is cursed," she murmured, her voice cracking. Emily, however, resisted. "You'll hurt Lila's home," she said, her tone eerily calm, as if speaking for the doll. When Sarah tried to hug her, Emily flinched, whispering, "She says you'll pay first, Mommy." The digging began at noon, the foggy Salem sky casting a pall over the backyard. Whitefeather chanted softly, burning cedar to ward off interference, while Father Reyes sprinkled holy water, his prayers a low hum. John and Sarah took turns with the shovel, unearthing gnarled roots that seemed to writhe under the blade. The soil reeked of that same decay from the basement flood, and tiny bones, birds, squirrels, tumbled out, as if the tree had consumed life. "This is no coincidence," Whitefeather said, citing native oral histories of hungry trees tied to vengeful spirits, like those near old burial grounds in Massachusetts. As they worked, the entity retaliated. The giggle swelled into a deafening chorus, shaking the ground. Emily, watching from the porch, screamed suddenly, collapsing in convulsions. Sarah dropped the shovel, rushing to her. Side Emily's eyes were white, her voice a growl. "Dig, and you all die." Father Reyes anointed her forehead, reciting, "Deliver us from evil," while Whitefeather burned sage directly over her. The convulsions stopped, but Emily's breathing was shallow, her pulse weak. "It's draining her," Reyes warned. "We're running out of time." By dusk, they'd exposed a tangle of roots, some pulsating faintly, as if alive. Whitefeather doused them with a mixture of sage and tobacco, sacred in Wampanoag tradition, while John lit a match. The flames caught slowly, smoke rising thick and black, carrying whispers of laughter. The house groaned, windows rattling as if in pain. Lila, still locked in the basement, thudded against the steel box, the sound echoing like a war drum. Sarah clutched Emily, whispering memories of their happiest times, Christmas mornings, baking cookies to anchor her daughter's spirit. "You're stronger than this, baby." Then a breakthrough. As the roots burned, the giggles faltered, replaced by a piercing wail. The air lightened. Emily blinked, her eyes clearing. "Mommy," she whispered, confused but herself. Hope surged, until the ground split open beneath the oak, a crack wide enough to swallow a hand. From it oozed that black, oily liquid, now bubbling like tar. Lila's laughter returned, sharper, as if mocking their progress. The steel box in the basement burst open, and footsteps, small, deliberate, echoed upstairs. Lila was free again, standing in Emily's room, its smile wider, eyes glowing red. Father Reyes and Whitefeather regrouped. "The roots weakened it, but the doll is still its focus," Whitefeather said. He proposed a final ritual: confront Lila directly, with Emily renouncing it, while they burned the remaining roots simultaneously. Sarah hesitated. Emily was fragile, but John agreed. "We end this tonight." They prepared, gathering salt, iron, and a relic from Reyes, a saint's medallion blessed in Rome, used in a 1980s exorcism case in Boston, documented for its efficacy. As midnight approached, the house grew colder, the giggles now a constant drone. Emily, clutching the family photo, seemed torn, whispering apologies to Lila under her breath. Sarah found a new clue, a 1693 letter in a historical database written by Abigail's sister, begging forgiveness for betraying her to the witch hunters. Her curse lives in betrayal, Sarah realized. The entity thrived on their fractured trust. John's initial denial, Sarah's obsession, Emily's loyalty to the doll. At 3 a.m., the ritual loomed. The family faced a choice: unite against the entity or lose Emily forever. The giggles grew triumphant, the house trembling as if alive. The clock struck 3 a.m., and the Thompson house became a battlefield. The giggles, now a cacophony of mocking voices, pulsed through the walls, as if the very foundation of the Victorian manor in Salem was laughing. The air was frigid, the candles in the living room snuffed out by an unseen breath, plunging the family into darkness, broken only by the red glow of Lila's eyes from Emily's room upstairs. The doll stood on the dresser, its porcelain face cracked but mending, as if fueled by the family's fear. John clutched the shovel, his knuckles white. Sarah held Emily, whose small body trembled with conflicting loyalties. Father Reyes gripped his saint's medallion, sweat beading on his brow. And Thomas Whitefeather sprinkled cedar ash, his chants a steady anchor against the chaos. The plan was perilous but clear: a dual-front assault. Whitefeather and John would finish burning the oak's roots in the backyard, severing the curses tied to the land, while Sarah, Father Reyes, and Emily confronted Lila directly, forcing the girl to reject the doll. Sarah had armed herself with knowledge from her research. Documented cases, like the 1970s Enfield poltergeist, showed that emotional unity could starve malevolent entities. "It feeds on our division," she whispered to John, her voice fierce despite the terror. "We have to show Emily we're stronger together." John nodded, his skepticism long gone, replaced by a father's desperation. "Let's end this." They split up. Whitefeather and John raced to the backyard, where the oak tree loomed like a sentinel in the fog. The crack in the ground had widened, oozing black tar that hissed when Whitefeather tossed in sacred tobacco. He chanted louder, invoking Wampanoag ancestors, his voice rising over the wind, now howling like a banshee. John shoveled frantically, exposing more roots that pulsed faintly, as if resisting. He doused them with gasoline, kept from their failed attempt to burn Lila, and lit a match. The flames roared, consuming the roots, and a scream, not human, but primal, erupted from the earth. The giggles faltered, but only slightly, as if the entity shifted its focus. Upstairs, Sarah and Father Reyes prepared Emily in her room, where Lila waited, its glow casting grotesque shadows. Sarah knelt beside her daughter, holding the family photo from their Cape Cod trip. "Remember this, sweetie? We were so happy. You're our light, not that doll." Emily's eyes flickered with recognition, but Lila's influence lingered. She clutched the air, as if reaching for the doll. Father Reyes began the exorcism, his voice booming. "By the power of Christ, release this child." He pressed the medallion to Emily's forehead, its warmth contrasting the icy room. The doll trembled, cracks widening, and the giggles turned to shrieks, rattling the windows. But the entity fought back. Emily convulsed, levitating again, her voice splitting into Abigail Morse's, "You betrayed me. You all betray." Sarah, tears streaming, held her daughter's hand, refusing to let go. "We love you, Emily. You're enough." She recounted more memories. Emily's first bike ride, their silly dance parties, drawing from psychological studies on anchoring identity during trauma, like those used in PTSD therapy. Father Reyes sprinkled holy water, which burned the floor where it touched Lila's shadow. The doll's eyes flared, and a gust of wind threw Sarah back, her head hitting the bed frame with a crack. Blood trickled down her temple, but she crawled back to Emily. "I won't lose you." Downstairs, the root fire blazed, but the tar surged, dousing the flames. Whitefeather, undeterred, poured salt into the crack, reciting a Wampanoag prayer for cleansing, documented in tribal records as effective against land-bound spirits. John, coughing through the smoke, saw something in the flames. Visions of Abigail Morse's trial, her screams as she was condemned, her curse binding her rage to the doll. It's her pain, he realized, echoing Sarah's findings about betrayal fueling the entity. He shouted to Whitefeather, "We need to forgive her. Break the cycle." Whitefeather nodded, adding a prayer of reconciliation, asking forgiveness for colonial wrongs, a practice rooted in native peacemaking rituals. Upstairs, the climax hit. Emily, caught between worlds, screamed, "Lila, I'm sorry, but I choose them." Her words, raw and heartfelt, shook the room. The doll shattered, porcelain exploding outward, but the pieces hovered, reforming. Father Reyes, unwavering, pressed the medallion harder, chanting, "Depart, spirit of vengeance." The giggles became a wail, then silence. Emily collapsed, free but weak. Sarah caught her, sobbing with relief. But the cost came swiftly. John, racing upstairs to reunite, tripped on the stairs as the house shook one final time. He fell hard, his neck twisting at an unnatural angle. He lay still, eyes open but lifeless. The silence was deafening. The doll lay in pieces, its glow gone. Whitefeather and Father Reyes rushed in, confirming the entity's retreat. The air was lighter, the house still. But John's death was the entity's final act, a bitter victory. Emily clung to Sarah, whispering, "I didn't mean it." Sarah, heartbroken but resolute, held her tight. It's not your fault, baby. Whitefeather and Reyes agreed. The curse was broken, but at a devastating price, mirroring real cases like the Smurl haunting, where entities claimed lives before banishment. The family, now just Sarah and Emily, faced a shattered future. But the ordeal left a lesson. Unity and love could conquer even the darkest forces if the cost was paid. The silence that followed John's death was heavier than any giggle the Thompson house had ever endured. The Victorian manor, once alive with malevolent laughter, now stood mute, its walls scarred from the ordeal. Cracked plaster, shattered windows, and the faint stench of burnt sage lingering like a ghost. Sarah knelt beside John's body on the staircase, her hands shaking as she touched his still face, his eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. Emily, curled in a ball on the living room floor, clutched the family photo, sobbing softly. Father Reyes and Thomas Whitefeather stood solemnly nearby, their faces etched with exhaustion and grief. The doll, Lila, lay in scattered porcelain shards across Emily's room, its red glow extinguished, its smile finally broken. The curse of Abigail Morse had been severed, but the cost was a wound that would never fully heal. Father Reyes checked the house with his crucifix, sensing no lingering malice. "The entity is gone," he said, his voice heavy. "The ritual worked. Emily's rejection and the burning roots cut its anchor." Whitefeather nodded, inspecting the backyard where the oak tree's charred remains smoldered. "The land feels cleaner," he said, drawing on Wampanoag teachings about restored balance, like those documented in post-colonial cleansing rituals in Massachusetts. But he warned Sarah, "Spirits like this leave echoes. Stay vigilant." Sarah, wiping tears, clutched Emily tighter, vowing to protect her daughter at all costs. The next morning, as Salem's fog lifted to reveal a pale sun, paramedics arrived, their sirens a grim echo of earlier tragedies. John's death was ruled an accident. Traumatic neck injury from a fall, the coroner reported. But Sarah knew the truth. She shared her journal with Father Reyes, who noted similarities to the 1980s Smurl case in Pennsylvania, where a demonic entity caused physical harm before its banishment, documented by investigators like the Warrens. "These things take a toll," he said softly, offering to stay in touch for spiritual support. Sarah and Emily faced a crossroads. The house, now quiet, felt like a tomb. Neighbors, aware of the rumors, avoided eye contact, and local papers whispered of another Salem haunting, citing historical parallels to the 1692 witch trial's lingering effects. Sarah considered selling, but hesitated. Fleeing felt like letting Abigail's curse win. Instead, she decided to stay, to reclaim the space for healing. She enrolled Emily in therapy, drawing on psychological studies, showing that children recover from trauma through routine and love, like those used post-hauntings in documented cases. Emily, though fragile, began speaking again, her bond with Lila broken, but her guilt lingering. "I didn't want Daddy to die," she whispered one night, curled in Sarah's lap. Sarah burned the doll's remains, mixing them with salt and burying them far from the oak, following Whitefeather's advice to prevent any residual energy. She also invited a local Wampanoag elder to bless the land weekly, a practice rooted in tribal traditions to maintain harmony, as seen in modern native-led land reclamations. Father Reyes held a small mass in the living room, dedicating it to John and the others lost: Max, Eleanor, Dr. Hale, Mr. Hargrove. The rituals brought closure, but Sarah's journal became her outlet, a record of survival she hoped to turn into a book, inspired by real survivor accounts like those from the Bell Witch haunting. Days turned to weeks. Emily returned to school, her drawings now of flowers and sunshine, though she avoided the attic. Sarah noticed small signs of recovery. Emily's laughter during a movie night, her first real smile since the ordeal. But the house held memories, creaks at night, shadows that seemed too long. Sarah installed motion sensor lights and kept a cross above Emily's bed, blending practicality with faith, as advised by Father Reyes. She also joined a local support group for paranormal survivors, a growing community in Salem, where members shared stories of unexplained events backed by local historical societies' records. One evening, as Sarah tucked Emily in, the girl asked, "Will Lila come back?" Sarah, stroking her hair, answered honestly, "She's gone, sweetie. We fought her together, and we won because we loved each other." It was a lesson hard-earned. Unity and resilience could overcome even the darkest forces. Sarah reflected on studies of family dynamics under stress, like those post 9/11, showing love as a bulwark against despair. She vowed to teach Emily this strength, to face fear head-on. Yet, a final mystery lingered. While cleaning the attic, Sarah found an old locket under the floorboards, engraved with A.M., Abigail Morse, perhaps. Inside was a faded photo of a woman with a haunting smile, resembling Lila's. Sarah buried it with the doll's ashes, whispering an apology to Abigail, hoping to end the cycle of betrayal. The giggles never returned, but Sarah kept her journal close, a reminder that some battles leave scars deeper than the eye can see. The weeks following the final banishment of Lila's curse were a quiet struggle for Sarah and Emily. The Thompson house in Salem, Massachusetts, no longer echoed with sinister giggles, but its scars remained. Cracked walls, a charred oak tree, and the absence of John, whose laughter once filled the rooms. Sarah, now a single mother, stood in the kitchen each morning, brewing coffee with hands that still shook slightly, her eyes scanning the horizon for signs of peace. Emily, at 10, carried a weight no child should, guilt over her bond with the doll and the loss of her father. Yet, in the stillness, a fragile hope took root, built on the lessons forged in their battle against a centuries-old curse. Sarah threw herself into rebuilding their lives. She enrolled Emily in art therapy, inspired by studies on childhood trauma recovery, like those used for survivors of natural disasters, showing creative expression could heal emotional wounds. Emily's new drawings, bright landscapes and family portraits, replaced the grim sketches of Lila's influence. Sarah also joined a Salem-based paranormal support group, meeting weekly in a cozy community center. Members shared stories of unexplained events, some documented in local archives, like the 1990s haunting of a nearby inn where laughter preceded accidents. These connections grounded Sarah, reminding her she wasn't alone. The house, though cleansed, held memories. Sarah hired contractors to repair the damage: new windows, fresh paint, and a reinforced basement door. Funded by selling some of Elias Crow's antiques, vetted to ensure no dark energies lingered. She followed Thomas Whitefeather's advice, inviting a Wampanoag elder to bless the land monthly, a practice rooted in tribal traditions of maintaining spiritual balance as seen in modern native land reclamations across New England. Father Reyes visited often, offering prayers and checking for residual activity. "Faith and vigilance," he said, citing the 1980s Boston exorcism case, where follow-up rituals prevented entity returns. Emily's recovery was slower but steady. She spoke less of Lila, though Sarah found her staring at the attic stairs some nights, as if listening for whispers. Therapy helped. The counselor, trained in cognitive behavioral techniques, encouraged Emily to voice her fears, mirroring methods used in post-haunting recovery cases, like the Ammons family in Indiana. One evening, Emily hugged Sarah tightly and said, "I miss Daddy, but I'm glad we're together." Sarah's heart swelled. She saw John's strength in her daughter's resilience. Sarah's journal became her lifeline, evolving into a manuscript. She titled it The Laughing Curse, weaving their story with research on Abigail Morse and haunted objects like the Annabelle doll, whose case files in the Warrens Museum detailed similar patterns of manipulation. Writing was cathartic, a way to process the betrayal that fueled the curse. Abigail's, born from her 1693 execution, and the family's in their moments of doubt. Sarah shared excerpts with her support group, who urged her to publish, citing its potential to help others facing unexplained phenomena. One crisp fall morning, as leaves fell like embers outside, Sarah and Emily planted a new tree, a maple, to replace the cursed oak. It was a symbolic act, inspired by Wampanoag teachings about renewal, documented in cultural studies of land healing. They buried a time capsule beneath it, a letter to John, promising to live bravely, and a photo of the three of them, laughing on Cape Cod. Emily whispered, "This is our tree, not hers." The moment felt like a seal on their survival. The life lesson emerged clearly. Resilience through unity and love can conquer even the darkest forces. Sarah reflected on psychological research, like studies post 9/11 showing families who faced trauma together grew stronger. Their ordeal taught them to confront fear head on, to trust each other even when doubt crept in. Abigail's curse thrived on division. John's initial skepticism, Sarah's obsession, Emily's innocence. But their collective stand broke it. This echoed real-world cases like the Perron family, who survived a haunting by clinging to love, later chronicled in historical accounts. Yet vigilance remained. Sarah kept the locket she'd found, engraved with A.M. in a blessed box, never opening it, but never discarding it, respecting its history. She taught Emily to honor the past while building a future, a balance rooted in both native wisdom and her own faith. The giggles never returned, but Sarah's journal ended with a warning. Evil hides in what we ignore. Face it, together, and you'll endure. As winter approached, Sarah and Emily decorated the house for Christmas, stringing lights to banish shadows. The manor, once a prison, felt like home again. Emily's laughter, pure and untainted, echoed through the halls, a sound stronger than any curse. Salem's fog still rolled in, but it no longer carried dread. They had faced the abyss and emerged, scarred but whole, proving that love could outlast even a laughing death. Picture this: a quiet evening in Salem, Massachusetts, where the fog no longer whispers dread. The Thompson house, once a battleground for a vengeful spirit, now glows with Christmas lights, a beacon of hope against the winter chill. Sarah and Emily, mother and daughter, sit by a crackling fireplace, their laughter, a pure, unbroken sound, filling the air where a cursed doll's giggles once reigned. The story of The Doll That Laughs at 3 a.m. isn't just a tale of terror. It's a testament to the power of love, unity, and resilience. If you've stayed with us through this hour-long journey, you've felt the chills, the heartbreak, and the triumph. Now let's unpack what it all means and how it applies to you. Let's rewind. The Thompsons, John, Sarah, and Emily, moved into a haunted Victorian manor, lured by its charm and history, only to uncover a nightmare tied to a doll named Lila. From the first eerie giggle at 3 a.m., linked to the death of their dog Max, to the tragic losses of Grandma Eleanor, Dr. Hale, and John himself, the curse of Abigail Morse, a 1693 witch trial victim, tested their strength. Each giggle signaled death, growing louder as the family fractured. John's skepticism, Sarah's obsession, Emily's innocence. But through rituals blending Wampanoag wisdom and Christian faith, documented in real-world cases like the Smurl haunting or the Enfield poltergeist, they broke the curse. Emily's rejection of Lila, the burning of the cursed oak's roots, and their unwavering love severed the entity's hold, though at a devastating cost. Why does this story matter? Because it's more than a ghost tale. It's a mirror for our lives. The curse thrived on division, much like the conflicts we face, arguments with loved ones, doubts that isolate us, fears that paralyze. Sarah learned this the hard way, documenting in her journal how betrayal fueled Abigail's spirit, a pattern echoed in historical records of cursed objects like the Annabelle doll, whose case files note manipulation through fear. Psychological studies, like those post 9/11 on family resilience, show that unity can overcome trauma. The Thompsons' victory came when they stood together, even as the house shook and Lila's laughter roared. You too can face your demons, literal or not, by holding tight to those you love and confronting fear head-on. Salem's history backs this up. The 1692 witch trials, documented in court records, were born from fear and mistrust, tearing communities apart. Abigail's curse was her revenge, but Sarah and Emily broke the cycle by choosing forgiveness and togetherness, planting a new maple tree to symbolize renewal, a practice rooted in Wampanoag traditions of land healing. This isn't just folklore. Museums like the Salem Witch Museum preserve accounts of lingering energies, and modern paranormal groups, like those in Sarah's support network, report similar stories of survival through unity. Now, here's where you come in. This story took everything: research into haunted artifacts, real cases like the Island of the Dolls, and the raw courage of a family fighting for each other. If it gripped you, hit that like button to let us know. It fuels the algorithm to share this tale with others. Subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into the unexplained, because trust me, there are more stories out there that'll keep you up at night. Drop a comment below. Have you ever felt a chill you couldn't explain? Maybe a place or object that felt wrong? Share your story. We read every one, and it could inspire our next video. Want to go deeper? Check the description for links to Sarah's fictional journal entries, inspired by real paranormal survivor accounts and resources on Salem's haunted history. If you're in a tough spot, feeling divided or afraid, take this lesson home. Gather your people, face the darkness together, and don't let fear win. As Sarah wrote in her manuscript, The Laughing Curse, evil thrives in silence, but love speaks louder. Let's keep this community strong. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder of resilience. Before we go, a final note. Sarah and Emily still live in that house, rebuilding their lives. The giggles are gone, but they keep a cross above Emily's bed and a maple tree in the yard, symbols of their victory. Every Christmas, they light an extra candle for John, Max, and the others lost. A ritual rooted in New England traditions of honoring the departed. The locket with AM stays buried, a nod to forgiving the past without forgetting it. As you turn off this video, ask yourself, what's your anchor, your family, your faith, your fight? Hold it tight, because even in the darkest nights, it's what pulls you through.